Hello and welcome to another one in the Get to Secure series of events that we're doing as part of Infinity Unbound. We are from the Infinity Group and I have with me Tom. Want to say hello, Tom?
Yeah, hi, I'm Tom. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Infinity Group.
And we've got Tristan.
Thanks, Ian. Hi, I'm Tristan Shortland, Chief Innovation Officer with Infinity Group.
And I'm Ian Stretton. I'm a pre-sales architect here at Infinity Group. So in this session, we're going to talk about sort of trying to help you to understand or give you some pointers as to trying to help you to understand your maturity level for your own organisation around security, and then maybe give you some ideas around, are you paranoid enough as well? So making sure that, are you checking the right things on a regular basis? So I think, feel here at Infinity Group that there's probably three main areas that you really should be focusing on when you're thinking about security. And again, we've got a series of events here which you can tap into and listen to and hear about some of those other thoughts as well. But we're going to kind of cover three main areas in this particular session around identities or identity, devices and data. So I think to start off with, if we can maybe just between us, if we share one of the topics, I suppose, let's just talk about at a very high level, basic detail, sort of what identity is, Tom. I think if you can start with identity, what is identity?
Yeah, I mean, an identity is it could be a person, not necessarily a person, but that's probably the most relatable concept, is that it's a person who has a username within the organisation, and they use that username. That username being the identity itself to access resources within the IT systems. That identity could be, instead of being a person, it could be a device that needs to log in to access resources, or it could be some kind of a service or an application that needs to log in somewhere to access resources. But the most relatable concept is that it's a user who works for the organisation.
Cool, thank you. I'll take devices. So the way I see devices are, obviously there's a number of different different types of devices. So you've got the traditional sort of laptops, desktops that people will use, obviously different manufacturers for those, of course. Devices also for us anyway include mobile phones. You've also got things out there now where it's recording data constantly for you, so in potentially a stateless kind of environment. So things like IoT devices or Internet of Things type devices. So sensors, for example, that are looking at a piece of manufacturing kit, for example. It's sitting there recording statistics around environmentals. So those are all devices that we need to think about. In addition to that, there's things around collaboration services, so wall boards, screens, smart devices in terms of being able to draw on or teach if you're in a classroom environment, for example. All of those are devices that we need to be thinking about, and all of those can access or are creating data for us to be worried about. And then moving on to data. So Tristan,
yes,
class data?
Data's everywhere, I suppose. Effectively, there's a couple of different types. So we've got structured data that sits in databases. So that might be a CRM system or a finance system, or a database that's for a specific piece of software that you might have written or used from a third party. And that data can be on premises, it could be in the cloud, could be hosted by a third party. So can be in lots of different places. Then got things like documents. So again, whether that's on a file server or in SharePoint, OneDrive. So that's unstructured data effectively, so it could be Word documents, PDFs, video files, images, that kind of stuff. So that's generally data that people are creating, so your users are writing documents or they're creating records in your database. Then we've got data that's generated by devices, like you say, IoT devices is a really good example. So that telemetry data that's being constantly created and fed somewhere. We need to think about how we're managing that and what security sits around that, both when it's being created, when it's in transit and it's moving from A to B, and then what happens when it's at rest as well. So yeah, the three are obviously intertwined and all need to be thought of from a security standpoint.
Cool. So I guess as we think about all three of those different areas, how would we, or how can we make sure that, as an employee and actually as an employer as well, that the organisation is still productive while at the same time being secure. So not letting everything run amok, but at the same time, being able to allow people to do their jobs on a daily basis. Let the devices create the data that it might need to create, etc. How can we do that but keeping secure?
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple levels to it. The concept is that you need to put security barriers in place, but there is a limit to how far you should go in terms of restricting what people can do, because as soon as you become overly restrictive to what an individual can do because users come to where they want to be productive. They don't want to sit around twiddling their thumbs or constantly jumping through hoops. And if you put too many barriers in the way, then they will look for ways to circumvent the security that you put in place. So overdo it and create a new problem, I think is probably the overriding message there. But at the same time, you can't just open everything up for anyone to do as they please. The objective is to find the balance where people can do what they need to do with the tools that you give them. So you give them the tools that facilitate all of their wants, and then secure those tools. So from an identity standpoint, you need to protect a user from phishing emails, from spam emails. You need to protect their login with multi-factor authentication. You need to monitor what they're doing and look for specific indicators within their activities. And we're not talking about what are they typing, what's on their screen. We're talking about where are they logging in from. Because if they logged in at 3:00 in London and then at 3:15 in New York, then clearly that's impossible and there's something wrong there. Monitoring those kind of signals and understanding when something is going wrong. Do prevent them from doing certain things. Don't let them share things like their calendar far and wide, because that can be used to track their movements and understand where they may or may not be at any given point in time and who they communicate with. And all of those things can be used by somebody that's trying to understand somebody's identity so that they can impersonate it and use that to compromise something else. And other tools that can be put in place beyond just simple monitoring and multi-factor authentication. Those are kind of the essential things. You can go beyond that to have other controls on how they can interface with a personal device versus a corporate device. What parts of the world do you want them to be able to log in from? If they work in the UK, why do they need to be able to log in from anywhere except the UK? And those things, if users just going about their normal daily life, those things don't disrupt them. They just make sure that people who are otherwise trying to disrupt them can't.
Did you want to add to that? Or?
Yeah, I guess from a data perspective, the principle is similar, right? So people need access to data to do their jobs. They need to be able to create data and update data. What we need to do is create an environment where they can only access what they need. That's going to make their life simpler. It's also going to protect them. So, by not allowing someone to delete something they shouldn't, that's helping them because they can't do the thing that's going to get them into trouble and cause a problem. And similar to what Tom said, you need to find a balance where they can be productive and access what they need without putting barriers in the way, because that's when data ends up in spreadsheets or on pieces of paper and that kind of stuff. So we want to make sure the systems are there and accessible and easy to use. And the way to get there is to understand the different personas within the business, what tools they need to do their job, and what levels of access to those things they need. So if we're talking about assessing where we're at, we need to understand if we've got lots of different systems and are they all fairly open, probably not where we want to be. We want to get to a point where we've got a good understanding of the systems we've got, they're consolidated as much as possible, and we've got a defined set of roles and role-based access for each of those applications. And if we haven't thought about those things, it's time to start thinking about it.
So more of a statement than a question, I think, as well. But there is definitely some good standards and methodologies that we can use to measure that, but also the organisations can use to implement some solutions as well. So for the one I'm thinking of straight away is zero trust, which is a methodology which is, I think it was developed at a university, if I'm right in thinking, through and a few key members of industry. But essentially, it's got a few core principles, but the main ones being is essentially you're constantly challenging, or you constantly don't trust either where the device is or the user is or the data is at any point. So you're constantly challenging when data is being accessed, and you're constantly making sure that the person is who they say they are, or the identity who they say they are, and the device is what the device is supposed to be, and the device is allowed to access. And at the same time, then when they're accessing the data, we're challenging, well, is this person on that device from this location supposed to be accessing that data? And if they are, what kind of access are they requesting? Is it a read? Is it a write? Is it a delete? Is it an edit? And it's constantly challenging that, and in session as well. So if it changes from a read situation of data to then actually I want to edit that or delete that record or that piece of data or whatever, it's challenged again to say, well, why? What is it you're doing? So there's definitely methodologies out there to do that, and of course there are IT tools in place to be able to do that as well, isn't there?
And that's kind of born out of a change in the working world, isn't it? You know, the old world was that you had a network perimeter, which was the firewall border around your office, and you considered that everything that was inside your network perimeter was trusted. And therefore any action that an authenticated user took within that was okay. But in the modern work world, that perimeter doesn't exist. You know, and the perimeter, you could consider it as being a series of pillars, which are identity, devices and data. And you need to secure each one of those in its own right to create a more modern perimeter. And, you know, zero trust principles of never trust, always verify, take that to that level further beyond the traditional perimeter and just say, well, it doesn't really matter what you're doing, where you're doing it from, because there is no trusted area anymore, because people can bring untrusted things into a trusted area. So it has to be at every, and again, this isn't necessarily something that is disruptive to somebody's working environment, because as long as they're not doing anything wrong, it doesn't bother them. And if they are doing something wrong, then it does flash up and say something is wrong here, and that's what we want to happen, is that it only brings those barriers into play when there's a reason to do that. But to achieve that, they require calibration, and that's the bit that takes the effort.
Yeah. And I suppose taking the question up a level, maybe one for you, Tristan, as somebody senior within Infinity Group, is so what responsibility is there for the board of directors, for example, in a company, to think about data, I guess, and what it means to the company and also the end users as well, the employees of the organisation. You want to talk about responsibilities there?
Because there's lots to think about there. So you've got kind of the regulatory and compliance angle. So you know, most organisations are looking after other people's data in some way, shape or form, whether that's bank details or order information or whatever it might be, and it's the organisation's job and duty to store that securely, make sure people that shouldn't access it can't access it, and you get fined if you don't do that right. Same with looking after things like GDPR and stuff, so not storing data that you don't need for longer than you need to, and those kind of things. So there's legal duties that everyone has with regards to data, and every organisation has some data that's going to be affected by that. There's then, putting aside the legal element, the disruption to the business if anything happens to that data. So if we lose data, so if stuff gets deleted that shouldn't be, or data gets changed or corrupted in some way, that what's that going to do to the business? We might get fined, and that's a bad thing. But also, if I can't run the business, then we're going to lose money or potentially go out of business. So we need to make sure that data is protected and secured and backed up, and then we've got a plan in place surrounding all of that. So need to think about the potential disruption to the organisation operationally as well as legally. And then finally, like I say, there's the staff to think of. You don't want to put someone in a situation where they could delete a load of data or change a load of data inadvertently. That's not fair on that individual. When there's tools and techniques we can employ to prevent that happening, it's your duty to do that. You shouldn't put people in a situation where they can effectively cause damage. That's beyond what they should be able to do. So we need to think about, again, for each role in the organisation, what should they be able to do and what shouldn't they be able to do, and then it's our responsibility to make sure that those are the things that they can and can't do.
Yep, cool. So I suppose, again, just on those 3 pillars, we can maybe try and answer them in turn, albeit I don't think there is a one finite answer to any of these, but when is it done, or what does good look like for identity, for example?
Okay. Well, I mean, the first point is it's never done.
Yeah. That's why I say it's a difficult question.
Because the landscape is evolving all the time. So whatever you do in the first month of the year won't be necessarily relevant or enough in the 6th month of the year. So you need to continually monitor and evolve with those changes in the landscape. And, that's easier said than done, because that requires interpretation of what's happening in the cybersecurity world. You have to put some reliance on security providers to evolve their products to meet with changing demand. But in the end, you do need to have some kind of understanding by reading indicators like Secure Score in Microsoft 365, for example, as a single indication point that says, yes, you're doing well, or no, you're not doing well. And what's good in that respect with identity security? Again, it's quite a subjective question, because it does depend on your needs as an organisation. If you're just an organisation that's got no need to deal with regulatory compliance, so you're not dealing with the FCA or anything like that, then your needs are kind of baseline, in the sense that you need to protect that user with things that we were discussing earlier on. So protect them from malicious emails, protect them from malicious documents, protect them from malicious websites, protect them with multi-factor authentication. All things you can do in Microsoft 365 with the right licensing out the box. And in a lot of cases, as we'll discuss in other sessions, things that a lot of organisations are licensed for now but don't utilise to their full extent. Even the monitoring concepts, if you're not, Microsoft 365 is generating information and alerts all the time, and if you're not consuming that data to lead you to any conclusions around what that user may or may not be doing, then it's information that's available to help secure your business, and it's wasted. But in terms of what's good, if you are meeting your targets that are based upon your compliance goals, your risk assessments, then that's what's good. And it's entirely unique to every single business, really.
Yeah, great. If I try to take devices, albeit again that's a similar sort of answer, there is no good, there's no done. Sorry, there is always good, but there's no done. So from a devices perspective, I suppose, making sure that those devices, if you own them, that is, if you corporately own them, that they are licensed, first and foremost, and that they're ideally up to date with the latest operating systems, the latest application patches. There's a reason that those are being patched on a regular basis, because they're making sure that they're being tweaked and changed to protect from threats that have been recognised and that have been changed. So by keeping those devices up to date, then that's going quite a long way to secure those. For the corporate devices, again, thinking about making sure that the users are using devices that are relevant for them as well. So don't give them a desktop when actually they need a laptop, or do they really need a laptop when actually they could get away with using a mobile phone, for example? There's lots of examples that obviously for people thinking about devices that might be out there doing a role or a job like those IoT devices. Again, maintenance of them sort of regularly, making sure again that they're still patched as well, and that you've got appropriate sort of antivirus if that's possible, or certainly data protection services. So there are definitely Microsoft Defender, for example, Defender for IoT, and those sorts of products are out there as well. And then if I think about devices that aren't corporately owned, that you still wish to allow into the organization, again, it's understanding what you are comfortable to allow, and then controlling that and checking that as it comes through the organization as well. So what I mean by that is, for example, if you have a user who you want to allow email on their own personal mobile phone, you can do that. That's absolutely fine. And then control or put that into a control bubble within the phone. So again, if that user ever lost their phone, or there was any worries about the phone, you could recover that data, or more importantly, you could remove the data from the phone no matter where it is. So it's having a sensible approach to things like that, certainly around devices, but certainly around the bring your own device or users' own devices. But yeah, it's about making sure the end user's got the right device available to them, I think, as well.
Yeah, I think for
Otherwise
me,
they go and find their own.
one of the overarching points for bring your own device has always been that, that when you are dealing with, and it's like the IT admin's challenge, right? Which is that they want to know about the device. They want to control the device so that they can make sure it is patched, that it's encrypted, that it's always looked after. And then as soon as you open the door to bring your own device, there is a device that's got arguably potentially the same level of access as the one that the IT admin is controlling, with no level of control on it at all. Nothing about it. You can't control whether it's updated. You can't control whether it's encrypted. Yet it's got that same level of access. And that's where the danger comes in. So it's fine to allow people to use their own devices, provided there is control placed around that. And I've spoken to organisations in the past who've said, "Oh well, we do a point. We get them to bring the device in and we have a look at it." Okay, and when did you last see it? Oh, 2 years ago. Okay, well, it's no longer relevant, is it? Because it's not really relevant a month after you saw it, so it's not an effective strategy. You have to have a means of either monitoring that device's health or limiting what it can do.
Yeah. And we'll try to do the same with data.
Similar answer, I suppose. But I think the start position is to know what data you've got and where it is. So we talked in one of the other sessions about how a typical organisation kind of grows organically and acquires different tools from multiple SaaS providers. That means there could be data in multiple geographies, stored on multiple different technologies, differing levels of security behind them. So I think it's important to take stock and go, right, what systems have I got? And there'll be things that departments are using that you might not even know they've got, and they've just gone out and bought them themselves. You need to make sure that each of those is storing data in a secure way. It's encrypting it when it's in transit, and all of those things that we know about. As much as we can consolidate onto Microsoft, obviously, that's much better because we've got granular control over where the data is stored and how it's processed. We need to know, as you were both just saying, if we've got devices that have data on them, again, that's data that we need to be aware of. And we need to have some due diligence process in selecting new systems. We need to know where they're hosted, if they're processing data, where that happens. Lots of SaaS providers now adding AI capability to their tools. That's potentially data that's then being sent somewhere else to be processed to then be sent back. We need to know where that's going. If we're owning that data and it's being moved around and processed in different places, and with varying levels of security going on, that's important stuff for us to understand. So a bit like the kind of changing landscape in terms of regulation and changing devices and things like that. We need to understand how, if we're using third-party providers for processing data, so CRMs, ERPs, project management tools, those kind of things, we need to know if they're updating things which are changing where data is processed or how it's managed, that's important. So being aware of everything you've got, where it's storing data and how it's storing it is your start position. Then similar to the others, it's about getting to good and recognizing that you're never actually done, in terms of making sure it's compliant with the policies that are hopefully in place, and making sure that stays compliant as well as those services change, and maybe the architecture behind them changes. We need to keep auditing them and keep up to date.
So I guess to finish off with a final question, where might an organisation go, or who might an organisation get in touch with that could help them on that journey?
Leading question. Infinity Group, obviously, but there are a broad range of service providers out there that provide security services. One of our core goals is to help organisations improve their security stance, help them with their compliance journeys on frameworks like Cyber Essentials or Beyond Cyber Essentials and GDPR, etc. But we're not the only one. There are others. Other brands are available.
But there's definitely, and to the point of the regulations as well, isn't there? There's some good, compliance here, which again we've covered in quite some depth in other sessions. So I'd urge you to go and watch those. But certainly Cyber Essentials you just touched on, ISO, CIS, for example, NIS, are all really good standards to work with. Closing point, Tristan?
Yeah, and I think where we add value there as an organisation is understanding those frameworks and what you need to be compliant and aligned to them, but also then understanding the technology on the other side. So often our customers, that's where the gap is. They know they need to achieve a certain standard to do business or to win more business. So we come and effectively bridge the gap between the kind of standard and the framework and the technology that's needed to support that, and that's what we do all day, every day. So good place to start, I think.
Yeah, come speak to us. We can definitely help. And that concludes that session. So hopefully that's been valuable for you, and you've learned some bits there. As we said, come speak to us, and hopefully we can help you. Thank you very much.